There are three, and only three, kinds of men in the world: cynics, fanatics, and mandate schoolmen. Ontilis, on the folly of men. The author has often observed that in the genesis of great events, men generally possess no inkling of what their actions portend. This problem is not, as one might suppose, a result of men's blindness to the consequences of their actions. Rather, it is a result of the mad way the dreadful turns on the trivial when the ends of one man crosses the ends of another. The schoolmen of the Scarlet Spires have an old saying: when one man chases a hare, he finds a hare, but when many men chase a hare, they find a dragon. In the prosecution of competing human interests, the result is always unknown and all too often terrifying. Drusus Achamian, Compendium of the First Holy War. All right, so time to talk about Chapter 2 of The Darkness That Comes Before. This is where, for the first time, we meet poor Achamian. I feel like I'm going to end up introducing every character as poor character, because everybody gets the shit beat out of them in some way or another. But we meet Achamian in the Holy Leper, where he's meeting with Geshrunni. And just one little bit that I liked was the owner of it mentions the owner of the Holy Leper boasting of authentic imitations of some display piece or chandelier or something. And I just thought that was just a great way to put it, because I've been to like shitty, cheap places where the person would totally be like, yeah, these are authentic imitations. These are just like the real thing. But they're not. They're like plastic shit, but they're authentic. And so it just, I don't know, it really sells the atmosphere of that place. I thought I thought that was good. We're also introduced more broadly to the Ainani people, who we learn are basically just a nation of metrosexuals, which is pretty funny. They're not funny, I guess, but I don't know. Queer, perhaps. The one passage, he had always thought high Aenon a nation of libertines and petty conspirators. That this made them a nation of kindred spirits was something he had never imagined. That just sort of reminded me of theater class, where all the theater kids were libertines and petty conspirators, but they sort of had a group feeling, or I don't know, not a group identity, but that feeling of community, that I think it sounds like the Anon I have. Anyway, so enough pointless rambling. Achamian gets confronted by Geshrunni with the Kore. I don't know. There wasn't really anything too interesting to say about this. This is a pretty sparse chapter for interesting stuff, because it's really more just like introductory sort of, this is what the Scarlet Spires are, this is who the Ainani are, this is what the Mandate Schoolman is. So stuff that, if you've read these books before, you kind of already know. So let's see, the next bit that I had marked out to mention is a passage on page 44. But when one became a spy, the world had the curious habit of collapsing into a single dimension. High-born men, even emperors and kings, had the habit of seeming as base and as petty as the most vulgar fishermen. Faraway nations like Conraya, High Aenon, Setidon, or Kian no longer seemed exotic or enchanted, but were as grubby and as weathered as an Enroni fishing village. Things holy, like the Tusk, the Thousand Temples, or even the Latter Prophet, became mere versions of things unholy, like the Fanim, the Kisharim, or the Sorcerer's Schools, as though the words holy and unholy were as easily exchanged as seats at a gaming table, and the recent simply came a more tawdry repetition of the ancient. Um, for notes, I'd written nihil novi sub sola, nothing new under the sun, which it sort of reminded me of that quote, phrase, saying. I don't know. But I sort of relate to this in my life where I've done a fair amount of traveling. I've not done lots. Like I know people who are like actually, able to do a lot of traveling, and they're very lucky to do so. And I'm sure they have the same impressions as I have had. But um, I don't know. I've traveled to places before, and I've seen enough of the world to get this same sense where, as much as we can fantasize about other places and hold them up as exotic and interesting and different, ultimately it's still a place. There's still people there, and people are, generally speaking, still people. Regardless of the culture, there are still going to be the same, quarrels between people, the same issues, the same, family quarrels and dynamics between, the poor and the rich and all that sort of thing. There's always going to be, it's all the same. As disappointing as it can be, the more that you see of the world, the more similar everything becomes. The less separated it all is, and it just sort of all wears into or blends into each other. And I don't know. I, I've sort of found this comforting sometimes, where I feel like our lives, and even my life, has essentially been lived before and will be lived again, insofar as all the conflicts that I have experienced have been experienced by others, and unfortunately will be experienced by others in the future. Um, Now, there are good things that have happened and will happen again, but it's just an interesting note where, time and space can feel less linear and more cyclical. And, I don't mean necessarily in the rise and fall of nations and the cycles, that are more grand, but more just in, I don't know, it's there's this one. I used to do origami a lot when I was younger, and there was this one band I would make from paper where you could turn it, and the outside would become the inside, and the inside would become the outside, and you could do this ad infinitum, and that's sort of what it feels like, because it feels like the passage of time and the changing of places is really not changing anything. I mean, it might change the specifics and the details, but generally speaking, the interactions between people are the same interactions. The ways that people go about solving specific issues might be superficially different, but the issues are the same issues that have existed, and the fundamental ways in which they're addressed is the same. I mean, it has different influences on our lives. Obviously, somebody living in prehistoric times, yes, still needs to eat, just like people today. And they would have to go about finding something to eat, which would be foraging or hunting or whatever. Um, and today I still have to go about finding something to eat. And I don't forage and I don't hunt, but I still have to go out into the world, acquire food, eat that food, and digest it and all that. And that's something that is universal among humans, at least, and among a lot of other living life. And so it does sort of collapse the world, but it also gives one, I think, a different perspective. It may not necessarily collapse the world, or to me it doesn't feel like the world is being collapsed so much as my field of view has been widened, I guess, where I'm not just looking through this narrow view of the specific time and place where I live and have grown up. I can sort of see things as they are in a timeless sense, if that makes sense, or a sense independent of time or place. I don't know. I'm sort of rambling again. I do that a lot. If you listen to these, I'm going to ramble. And it's probably just going to sound like pseudo intellectual garbage. And I don't think that necessarily this is what Bakker was getting at. More, I think, just that this is, I don't know, sort of similar to what I remember him, the author Bakker, maybe talking about in some interview or something, or maybe this was somebody saying something about the books, but I remember in one way or another coming upon the idea that Kellis was thought of as a monk who had realized that, everything is a spook, basically, I guess, right? Like cultures are just artificial and, these are just parades and charades that we hold and perform for each other and ourselves. And I think this may be Achamian's way of understanding that, where his experience lets him see that perhaps holy and unholy don't really have any meaning, or that their meaning is dependent on context or the observer rather than that which is being observed. And so I don't know. I think that might be interesting to think about. But moving on. So then we get, yes, Achamian was fooled by Geshrunni. He feels that he is losing his edge, that he gained his intel through incompetence. I feel like this sort of shows that Achamian feels sort of helpless, or not necessarily helpless, but just that he is not the master of his own fate. And this is, in a way, him recognizing that he does not come before himself, that other things precede him, and so he is not his master. But again, he doesn't perceive it in the way a Dunyani, in the way a Dunyan would. I almost said Dunyani or Dunyan, and it ended up Dunyan. I don't know. The problem with these long recordings is that I can't just stop and start over again, and I don't have the patience to edit this. So I don't know, maybe that'll change, but for the first few chapters and the first few episodes, it's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride, I think. But anyway, so we get to the point where Achamian learns of Sashioka's assassination. The Kisharim somehow got into the Scarlet Spires and killed him and left. And I'm not entirely certain on the specifics, right? I know there's a point of view with Eleazarus where we see it happen, and I think it was that the Kisharm sort of appeared out of nowhere, but I'm not sure if that's them appearing out of nowhere insofar as they were invisible and then became visible, or it was teleportation, like the metagnostic cant of transposition or whatever it's called that Kellis and Eärwa uses. I don't know. But it doesn't really matter. Sashioka is assassinated. The Scarlet Spires wage a war on the Kisharim, and this is why they joined the Holy War. But we're not at that point. The Holy War hasn't even been declared yet. What else? And one of my understandings of the Kisharim attacking the Scarlet Spires, I had for some time thought that that was a calculated move on the part of Moangus. But then I was rereading the Thousandfold Thought one time, and I think I had read that the Kisharim had thought that these skin spies, which Moangus had discovered, were artifacts of the Scarlet Spires, and so attacked them independent and actually against Moangus's advice or guidance. Whereas I had thought before that Moangus had thought, I'll send the Kisharim to assassinate the Sashioka Grandmaster, whatever, so that by the time Maythanet declares the Holy War, the Scarlet Spires will have a reason to join it. Apparently that's not the case. It's at least in my current understanding, it's just that the Kisharim took revenge because they thought that the Scarlet Spires were responsible for the skin spies and not the consult. So I don't know. But we move on to the point where Geshrunni leaves the Holy Leper and he is confronted by the bovine skin spy, who I think this is a pretty good section. Excuse me. The description of the skin spy is one that is not threatening, right? He's a fat old man, or at least he appears to be, which contrasts all the more sharply with his behavior, and I think that heightens Geshrunni's own suspicion, or not suspicion, but feeling of being exposed. But Geshrunni is also drunk, and so he continues to provoke the skin spy, and the skin spy doesn't really tolerate it. And then we cut away from that. Though we do learn that skin spies are not sorceress. So up to this point, we might conclude, the first time reader might conclude that this is a Kisharim agent who Geshrunni has attacked, and they might think that, oh, maybe the Kisharim are watching Achamian. But nope, it's the console. So, next bit, we move on to the dreams we learn of for the first time, and particularly this dream is the Calmomian prophecy. Calmomian, not Calmomian. So, one bit of this that I wanted to talk about is that Calmomus says that he hears the gods and he can hear them in the sky and whatever. Let me actually... Oh, there's this bit that I was going to talk about that I didn't. We'll get back to the dreams. So Geshrunni, right? So this is right after he leaves the Holy Leper and before he's confronted. Suddenly, his betrayal struck him as a pathetic thing. He had told the only real secret he knew to an enemy of his master's. Now there was nothing left, no treason that might quiet the hatred in his heart. And while obviously I've not been in his specific situation, I can sort of relate to this, where I've had a lot of emotional intensity and emotional buildup and anger and frustration. And then I do something to get it out of my system. And then when I'm done and it's, whew, and the emotions have sort of calmed down, I'm like, oh, fuck. Well, what now? I kind of feel like a dummy, right? Like, excuse me. If I'm feeling, I don't know, super anxious or triggered, not like the stupid internet, oh, you triggered, but like actually triggered in terms in like a PTSD sense, and I self harm, which is a thing that I've done in the past. uh, the build up and the emotion and doing it, and it all seems like, okay, this is what I need to do, this needs to be done, and then the emotion goes away, and then it's like I'm sitting there in bed with like blood dripping down my leg, and I'm holding a sharp piece of metal, and I'm like, uh now what? Like I feel kind of stupid, right? Like, there, and it's not one to one, right? There was nothing left, no treason that might quiet the hatred in his heart. Um, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar insofar as once you do the dumb thing, uh, and it doesn't give you the relief that you thought it would, it's just like, well, shit, I kind of feel stupid because that didn't do anything, and now I did that thing, and I don't feel any better. So it's like, what, so poor Geshrunni. And then we get to the point where Geshrunni had actually killed someone once, and he thinks that this would be a good night, he thought, to kill. Um, and again, this can sort of tie into the similar experience where, well, okay, now I've done this thing, and I don't feel any better. Now, what else should I do next? Got to do something else. Or you could take another tack, and this is Geshrunni maybe killing himself or the Scarlet Spires in effigy, or wanting to do so at least. Obviously, he doesn't kill the skin spy. He gets blown the fuck out, really. But um, no, so it could be that he would, if this were just a beggar or someone confronting him that wasn't a skin spy, he might kill them and vent his rage and frustration, both at the Scarlet Spires and at himself for having betrayed not really the Scarlet Spires, but himself. Um, I think that's possibly why he might have been so eager to kill, and so brash in his interaction with the skin spy, even after realizing that maybe things are not what they seem to be. But he was drunk and he just didn't know when to stop. So, rip. He would have died anyway, though. I mean, that it's not. It was not up to Geshrunni whether he lived or died that night. He was going to die. So, anyway, on to the dreams in the Kelmomian prophecy. As I mentioned, Kelmomus, here's the gods, and I had wondered if this was a dying man being delusional, or if he did hear the gods, because this obviously was at a time when the no god was walking or active, or however you want to phrase it, um, and so I had two understandings, but I think maybe now as I think about it, there might be a better understanding. But that also raises some questions. So before the no god, the gods could see into the world, and that was how it was, right? And presumably some people could hear the gods or communicate with the gods or whatever, be they priests or one of the few. Probably not the latter. But for whatever reason, at least some people could hear the gods before the no god. Then the no god comes, and I think the gods could not hear anything from the inside, I guess you would call it. But I don't know that for sure. I don't remember if that's 100% an accurate recollection of how it's described, or if the population of the world needs to be less than 144,000, or if 144,000 means less than that means that the world is closed off permanently and that the connection cannot be reestablished if the population goes over 144,000, or what. I don't remember exactly. I'm sure the book will clear it up. But I was sort of confused. Like, is this a dying guy who can hear the gods? Because he does make the prophecy, and the prophecy is accurate. We later in the books, Kelmomus sees actually Kellis, right? Like he has the decapitants on his belt. That is definitely Kellis. So he's able to, at least there's something going on that is not normal, right? There's some supernatural something going on, but I don't necessarily know if that's the influence of the gods or how this is happening. So I don't know. I just thought that was a small note I would make. Then he mentions if Seswatha. He asks Seswatha if he remembers being told that now Coyote stole into the depths of Golgotharoth. And I don't think that's something Seswatha could ever fucking forget. And it also makes me question how Kelmomus doesn't know that Seswatha was there with him. But that's a whole nother can of worms. So the last bit that I wanted to touch on in regards to the Kelmomian prophecy is, give me 1 second. Kelmomus saying, I see him so clearly. He's talking about now Coyote, his son. I see him so clearly. He's taken the sun as his charger, and he rides among us. I see him. Now, again, I don't know if this is dead man, dying man, being crazy, or if he is somehow has some sight, maybe similar to the judging eye, but obviously not the judging eye, and that he's seeing now Coyote, the no god, who now Coyote becomes the no god. And so is it that he's looking and he sees on the horizon now Coyote, and he thinks he's taken the sun in as his charger, when really he's the no god? Or is he just delirious? And the bit after that is that I see him galloping through the hearts of my people, stirring them to wonder and fury. Certainly the no god, well, maybe the no god is galloping through the hearts of his people, but he would be not stirring them to wonder and fury. He would be scaring the shit out of them. So I don't know. Maybe he's delirious. Maybe he's seeing now Coyote as the no god. Who knows? Who knows what happens to the person that becomes the no god? Probably nothing good. Jeez, I can't imagine. So anyway, he prophesizes that one of my seed will return at the end of the world. Does he say? Yep, he says seed. I just sort of assumed that would be there, and lo and behold, it was. So he dies. Then Achamian wakes up. I also don't like the phrase "a dream drawn from the sheath." I don't really understand what that's supposed to to convey. It just feels uncomfortable. But that happens. Then we get to Geshrunni getting drowned. Rip. But there's not really anything new there. Then we go to Achamian mulling over the thoughts about the dreams. We see him already cataloging the dreams and the differences between them. We hear about the Library of Sauglish. So that we obviously go there in the judging eye. So it's nice to hear about that. But he then, writes down that the dream seems different and more powerful, more urgent. He doesn't write down that it's urgent, but there had been a disturbing immediacy to the dream is written. So this is because the Anasorimbor Kalos has come, or he doesn't come until he meets Serwe, but he's left Ishual. He has entered the world of man as it is, and so that does explain the intensity of the dream. And then we get to the bit about Achamian wondering why does he pick at these dreams when the dreams already hurt so much? Why can't he just leave them be and not cause himself pain by tracking them and by thinking about them? And this is sort of, there were, I guess, two ways that I wanted to go with this to talk about. One is the PTSD angle, where obviously all the mandati are, they have PTSD. Who knows if it's theirs or if it's Siswatha's. It's probably both, because they experience the dreams as their own experience, so they would be the ones being traumatized. And it's Siswatha's trauma. And this is also an interesting bit that also pertains to the non-men, but trauma memories are not encoded in the brain in the same way. They are timeless, I guess it is a good way to say it. They don't fade the same way other memories do. They can be re-experienced because of the way that they're written in the brain. And so that intensity of recollection, to the point of it nearly being a reliving of the events, is ideal for Siswatha's purpose, as well as the non-men who lose their memories and they want to remember. So of course they etch in their brains these terrible things, or at least the erratics, mind you, not all non-men. Not all non-men, dude. They etch in their brains these traumatic memories because they will not be forgotten, because they're traumatic memories, and they are remembered differently. Now, who knows if non-men brains are, I mean, they certainly aren't different from human brains, but obviously not enough for their memory encoding to be different when it comes to trauma. And so also Achamian specifically, I think part of why Achamian himself picks so at these dreams, can I say pick in relation to Achamian, or is that racist? Because it's a slur for the Ketier. Yikes. So I think Achamian wants confirmation that what he is doing is the right thing. And I think the dreams are the only way he feels he can get that confirmation. Because Achamian, I think, ultimately is a good person, as much as anybody in these books are, and he feels the bad things that he does to people. The bit we're gonna come up on with Eärwa is weighs heavily on Achamian, and it's very difficult for him. And that wouldn't be the case uh, if he were Confus. God, they are two very dissimilar characters, Confus and Achamian. But I think Achamian wants meaning. He wants to know that he's doing these things that hurt him and hurt other people because it's worth it. And that actually is how the mandate convinces him to, pursue Eärwa, because they know that's what will work with Achamian. But anyway, picking at these things to sort of find a meaning or to find answers is something I've done. I don't dream about the apocalypse, but I've had trauma in my life, and I've had things I do remember, and I have things that I don't remember, and sometimes I find myself the same as Achamian, going over what do I remember, what don't I remember, trying to wrest meaning from what I remembered before and how I'm remembering it now, and just analyzing all of the minutia about it, trying to wrest some meaning out of it. For me, it's closure that I seek, closure and, I don't know, validation perhaps. Whereas Achamian, he knows that this stuff happened. There's no question, and there's no question what happened because he remembers it very vividly. But there are still the differences. But I think he's drawn to the dreams because he's drawn to seeking meaning and validation that what he is doing is right. And I guess to some degree that is what I seek, validation that what I'm doing insofar as how I handle my life is right. I'm not trying to get too personal in these conversations, but I also don't want to shy away from things that I think are meaningful to discuss, and I'm not going to sanitize what I talk about just to make it palpable, because these books already alleviate me of that burden. They are not sanitized, so I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm it's gonna come through pretty clear if I keep doing these, which I hope I do. But I relate a fair amount to Achamian. He's he's you know oh, he's a good character, that I relate to him because he's a great. No, that's not what I'm saying. I mean, he's very well written in portraying this sort of soft, emotional but strong emotional person. um he just is that way. And I don't know, I think he's a compelling character. Certainly more than Serway. God, I hate. Ugh. Out of all the characters in these books, Serway is my least favorite. She's not even a character. She's an object. The fucking Wathi doll has more characterization, has a better character arc than she does. The Tabby cat has a better character arc and is written better than fucking Serway. Holy shit. Backer, dude. Anyway, then we get to basically the end of the chapter. You couldn't get through the chapter without at least implying child rape and child prostitution. Thanks, Backer. But Achamian uses him to try to deliver a message to Geshrunni, who will not get it. For obvious reasons. He is dead and doesn't have a face. He could probably receive the message with a face or without a face, but Pomegranate or Cheeky might be put off by that. But it doesn't matter because he is dead. Anyway, we get a little insight into Achamian's, I don't know, pederasty or preference for femboys. Who knew that this would be a thing that I would be talking about tonight? But anyway, so, oh God. I just read the bit about the drunk aristocrat tugging on his crotch, asking if he had seen his sweet pomegranate. Oh man, some of the stuff in these books I could do without having read. Oh my God, I can't even look at peaches when I go shopping anymore. But anyway, that is so Achamian fetched a silver ancillary from his purse and could not help smiling at the boy's awestruck expression. Cheeky snatched the coin from his palms as though from a trap. For some reason, the touch of his small hand moved the sorcerer to melancholy. Melancholy is not a feeling that I think Confus is familiar with, but I think it is one that Achamian is intimately familiar with. So that's where I'll leave it for tonight. Chapter 1 and done. So yeah, I don't know. Miscellaneous bookkeeping stuff. Sorry that these aren't coming out super fast. I know one chapter is pretty much not a whole lot, right? I mean, I'm doing this where I'm reading it, writing my notes, and recording this in an evening. I just have stuff in my own life going on where I can't do this every day, and I don't know, if I did, I would get burnt out pretty quick. So I don't know. I'm trying to get it to be maybe once a week at least. I think it's actually probably being closer to 2 weeks, but whatever. Whatever happens will happen. Que sera, sera, right? In regards, I guess, to the video, I saw someone mentioning like, oh, why is there computer game footage? What does it have to do with it? It doesn't. It has nothing to do with the darkness that comes before. I just thought I would upload something so y'all aren't just staring at a blank screen if you happen to be watching this. I don't know. I also thought it would be funny to have Slime Rancher be the thumbnail for, the darkness that comes before, because the tones between the two are just oceans apart. Excuse me. So, I don't know. Maybe next video I'll just do a blank screen. It'll save me the hassle of having to do any work. And it might upload faster. Who knows? So, anyway, I think this is for like the 5th or 6th time, the time where I'm going to end it. So, good night. I guess it's nighttime for me, so I don't know when you are going to be listening to this, but if it's night, if it's day, I hope you have a good time, and thank you for listening.